Hi guys, today I'm really excited to review Asrock's Taichi RX 5800 XT pitted against the RX 5900 XT and also looking at other GPUs as well, even the 3000 series by NVIDIA. Now let's get started with a look at this beautiful piece of design. Now it's got three fans to start off with. The middle fan has a ARGB fan, so it has LED and it's got a switch on the card that it can be turned on and off with. It's got two fans on the side as well. They all spin in the same direction. It's got a massive heat plate piping that cools it. It's got air detecting fins. It's got a reinforced metal frame to keep it sturdy, and it's got ARGB backlit plate as well, and it's got the top of it has RGB as well. Other than that, it's got one HDMI 2.1 VPR, two display ports 1.4 with DSC, and one USB-C type C port. On top of that, this card has a switch for the quiet mode and the performance mode, which is Q mode and P mode. Now, as you guys all know, that the new AMD graphic cards, the 6000 series, they're all on a 7 nanometer chip, and all of them have 16 gigabytes of memory. This one's got 256-bit GDDR6. Now, it's called RDNA 2 architecture, which is their improvement on their last gen RDNA. This supports PCIe Express 4, so PCIe 4, which is really good. And the thing that you guys have to note with this card is the Taichi needs a 3 8-pin power connector. It would not work with 2. So if you're ordering it and you're excited just like me, get it and you got it, and then you find out that you don't have the connectors, the connector that if you are in that case like myself, the connector that you will need is a Y splitter, and it has to be a PCIe 8-pin to 2 PCIe 8 pins. So one end PCIe and it splits it off. Now I have wasted this and kind of put it in a eGPU. It's gonna go in the end to the eGPU. I still haven't made up my mind whether I'm going to leave this in the eGPU or the RX 5900 XT and put this one in the system. These are some of the really impressive specs. Alright guys, so let's get into the specs. The reference card for the RX 5900 XT, the base clock is 1825 MHz. The gaming clock is 2015 MHz, and it's got the boost clock at 2250 MHz. Okay, let's move off to the SFX Speedster Merch 319 RX 5900 XT, which is an AIB card. I've ordered it and I'm waiting for them to get the green light to start selling them, I guess, which will be at the start of next year. The boost clock on that, this is a AIB 5900 XT. Okay, the base clock is 1925 MHz, so 100 better than the normal one, than the reference card. The game clock is 2105, again around just about 190 MHz more, and the boost clock is up to 2340 MHz, so again a 90 MHz more. Now let's look at this Asrock, which is a 5800 XT. Okay, so the base clock for this is 1925 MHz. It's matching the AIB 5900 by XFX. Now let's move on to the gaming clock. It's clocked at 2110 MHz, which is 5 MHz. I know it's not a lot, but it's 5 MHz more than a AIB SFX 5900 XT. And lastly, the boost clock is 2360 MHz, which is a nice 20 MHz more than the reference. And if you compare that to the AIB one, and if you compare that to the reference card, that's a boost of 110 MHz. This card is absolutely amazing. It's a monster. The only problem that I have, for example, with this Taichi 5800 XT, and let's say if we compared it to something like Asus ROG Strix LCRX 5800 XT Gaming OC. So let's say if we compared it with that one, if we were in a perfect world where there weren't any shortages and both of them were available, the Asus is $17.99 in Australia. It's priced at $17.99. Okay, whereas the Taichi is priced only at $15.99. $14.99. Okay, that's $300 less. All right. However, they've got both the same speeds, the clock, overclock, boost, and all that. Speeds are the same. The specs are the same. The only thing that I have found with the Asus is because it's liquid cooled, it's really cool. It stays really cool under a lot of pressure. I haven't seen it spike more than 50 Celsius. And whereas the Asrock really does get hot in depending in what scenarios, and it does get loud. The Asrock gets loud, whereas the Asus does not get that loud either. So the Asus, in other words, is built to, you can like, if you're happy and if you're confident with playing around with your GPU, you can actually like play around with it and even boost it further than that, so make it hotter, you know, because it's built to handle it. Where the Asrock, I would not recommending playing around with it too much, especially in Australia now. We're getting really hot, and if it's in a hot environment, personally I wouldn't play around too much with it. Other than that, it's a behemoth card. It's beautiful. I love it how big it is. It reminds me of like a V8 supercar, where it's just, you open the bonnet and it's beautiful, and there's beautiful lines there, and reds and greens, the RGB lighting and everything like that, back, front, top. That reminds me of it. Now, just a tip for all you guys, if you're wasting your time like me and putting it in a eGPU, this does fit the Razer Core X and the Razer Core X Chroma eGPU. I have tested it myself. I've put it inside. It goes inside. Only problem you're going to face is the 8-pin connectors that I talked about before. So the Razer Core X only has 2 8-pin, whereas this needs 3. And the solution I told you guys before as well. That's what you got to do. All right, without further ado, let's get into the gaming benchmarks that I've run with these cards. I'll be covering that. Alright guys, before we get into the graphs and things like that, what I would like to start off with is the overclock, just the proper one that is quoted by the game, by the card. So that's at 2360 megahertz. Now, I would like to add something that I've read up, that the Asus liquid cooled one, 6800, that goes up to 2410 megahertz. So that's a lot more than one, quite a bit more than this one, and it's also really cool. Anyways, without getting too distracted by that, let's look at the fan speed. So by auto default, so if you look at the first graph, auto default, that's the temperature is 71 degrees, and the noise levels were at 36 decibels, which is nothing, like you can't hear the card at all. However, it's running quite warm. When I used this little tweaker thing that Asrock has, which was quite impressive, I really liked it. It doesn't look too bad either. So when I used this tweaker, at just 60%, I was getting the temperature at about 65 and the noise went up 41. When I boosted it to 80%, it went 59, and the noise level went to 44, which is not too bad. Like from 71, if you look at auto, which is, I don't know what fan speed that is at, whatever auto is it, I think it's pretty slow. But if you look at like just going from 36 to 44, that's not a lot. 44 that's still pretty okay, which is only 9 decibel increase, but the temperature dropped like 12 degrees, which was really, like 80% is really good. However, full blast, no issues at all. 61 degrees, really low temperature, and the noise level was at 52 decibels, which is not loud either. So what I really wanted to do is, like, you can obviously, it leaves room. What that means is, if you look at the full blast fan, that's pretty cool still. Comparing the full blast to auto, so at auto, it sits at 71 degrees. These cards are made to go up to 80, 90, whatever, you know, degrees. So at full blast, it's at 61 degrees. Now, the sound wouldn't go louder than 52, 53 decibels, because that's full blast fan. So 50, let's say 55 decibels, not loud at all, not super loud. It is loud, not super loud. You can push the degrees up to 80 and like really overclock this beast of a card. So it's got that headroom to be overclocked even further and get even more juice out of this card. So it's made for those people. And what differentiates, if we lived in a perfect world and everyone was following the MSRP, what differentiates this with the Asus is the Asus is $300. It runs cooler, it can be overclocked a lot more, it has a more higher boost speed. All right, now again, getting distracted, let's go back into the overclocking. And something else that's relatively kind of new that a lot of people are doing is volting or underclocking. And what that means basically is they'll reduce the voltage intake. So this card, when it's overclocked, it was draining nearly 500 watts, you know, nearly 500 watts. It was just sucking it out. However, when you underwater it, it gets stuck around 300, which runs the card a lot cooler and things like that. Looking at these graphs that I've got, is like the frame rate increases, yes, by 11 frames per second. The temperature is about the same. And by underclocking it, I didn't like the temperature was any cooler. It didn't run any cooler, and yeah, frame time in milliseconds of difference either. So that's just self. And these were run in my room, which is around 30 degrees. These days Melbourne has a few days that are really, really warm, and again I was using the Asrock tweaker. Now, next step. All right, now let's get into the gaming benchmarks, guys. So straight off, we've got Tomb Raider. Now, looking at Tomb Raider, I've put the NVIDIA cards up top, going first. Then I've got the AMD card. So first two cards are reference cards from NVIDIA. The next card is the Taichi, which we are looking at and interested in, and then the two reference cards being the 6900 XT and the 68, not the X. So looking at this, and this is the kind of gaming that I recommend. 2K. Okay, I don't recommend playing 4K. From where, if you look at a bell curve, like a lot of people sit really far from some gamers sit really far from their PC screen. Some gamers sit really close. But if you look at the 80%, most gamers sit a bit at about like a foot and a something. And at a foot and a something, you can't tell the difference between 2K and 4K. You need to be really close. So that's why I like 2K. So anyways, without getting into that, I've got another video. I'll link that at the end that goes into more details and tests and things like that between 1080p, 2K and 4K. Anyways, let's look at the 2K results first, then 4K. Now, all of these have been maxed out, okay? All of these settings have been maxed out without ray tracing, okay? Because if I turn on ray tracing, AMD doesn't support them. They get a performance penalty of about 30 to 40% in my experience. So anyways, let's start off with this. So looking at the Taichi and comparing it against the 6900 XT, look at that, guys. Like, it's nearly there. Like, that's margin for error. It's competing and punching above its weight, and even competing with the 3090. Okay, so the Taichi is valued at $1499, whereas the RTX 3090 is nearly $1,000 more than that. Okay, yeah. So anyways, without getting bogged down onto this, let's move on to the next test. Now, the next game that I'll be looking at is Zero Dawn, Horizon Zero Dawn. Okay, so again, the same sort of settings where I've set it up the same way. So looking at this game, guys, straight away you can see that bang, it's the AMD cards are doing a lot better. You can see that. Like, so that the realistic 6800 XT was to go up against the 3080. Given the 3080 is a reference card and the Taichi one is really strong, but even if you look at the 6800, not the XT version, that's not in Horizon Zero Dawn at 2K gaming, not at 4K. At 4K, I will say the NVIDIA cards are a bit better and they fare better. So, but looking at the 6800 and 3080, not much of a difference, like only 6 frames, 6 per second, and really good card they've made. But looking at the Taichi, it's right up there. It's beating the 3090 and it's almost the same as the 6900 XT reference card. Alrighty, now let's look at another game for you guys. Okay, the next game I've got is Doom Eternal. Now, looking at Doom Eternal, this is a title that is first-person shooter. I really love first-person shooters. I personally like playing them at the highest frame rates possible. 240 is really nice, play them at, but 144, you can't go wrong with that either. So let's start off 2K. So you've got the 3090 at a whopping 302 frames. However, the Taichi card is not too far behind at 280. It's beating the 3080 reference again, and it's nearly matching again the 6900 XT. All right, and remember what I said about overclocking this card, it at full blast and things like that, getting it up to 80-90 degrees. Look, if you can do that, I think this card might put on 10 frames, and if it does that, then you're basically beating the 6900 XT reference card from AMD, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Pretty good result to say in anyone's book. Now, the last game I'll be looking at called Division 2. That's EA's game, shooting around, and it's a third person. Now, here you can see a clear advantage of the 3090. The 3090 pulls the outhead of the 146 frames per second. Anyways, the Taichi does gain trading blows with the 6900 XT. Again, you got to remember, you can push this Taichi card a tiny bit further, can go harder with it. Now, let's move on to the next lot of tests, and these are the tests for 4K. Now, starting off again with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Now, looking at the 3090, it sits up top 94 frames per second, okay? And however, looking at the Taichi again, it's 9 frames per second behind, 3 frames per second behind the 5900 XT. So not too bad a result. Not that the other ones are super good and going up 100. The only one that got close to 100 was the 3090. Okay, so now let's try and look at Horizon Zero Dawn and see what kind of results we'll get here. And this, to my surprise, because of how well AMD cards did in the 2K, it didn't fare as good for them in the 4K again. So I'm seeing kind of a pattern. Not looking at the 3080, but at the 3090. Yeah, so the 6900 XT, yes, AMD has made that gap card which works between the 3080 and 3090. But looking at the 6800 XT by Taichi, it's not too bad. Now remember again, overclock this has beaten here in the 6900 XT, although that's within margins of error. But let's say if you boosted this to, let's say, 85, 86, that's a really solid result at 4K. You know what I mean? From a graphic card that doesn't cost as much as the 3090, and it's a tiny bit cheaper. Well, $1,000 well in the MSRPs, things like that. Now let's move on to the next one. This one is Doom at 4K. Now Doom at 4K, again, you will see the 3090 pulling up again. However, this is where the 6900 XT has pulled a little bit further. In 4K, it just pulls out a little bit further up ahead. Now let's move on to division, the division 2. Okay, so here the AMD cards, they're all basically same, feels like 4K. The RX 6800 did nearly as good as the Taichi and the C9. So depending on what kind of game you're playing and things like that, but at 4K you're constantly seeing that the Nvidia card 3090 is pulling a lot further than the rest, which is amazing. Alrighty, now let's look at the last thing. I wanted to look at two kind of pricing, so the real world pricing and also the MSRP pricing. Okay, so starting off with the MSRP, which is in blue. Okay, so looking at the reference 8600, this is Aussie dollars, by the way. If you can't, in America it's like $500, 6800, but it's at $949. The AMD 6800 XT was at $1049, $1,050, and the AMD 6900 XT is around $1599, $1499. I think $1599 was the price that it was going for. Again, with US conversion, it's hard to tell. Now, moving on to the Asrock Taichi card, 6800 OC card, that should be selling for about $1499. Okay, but don't ask me how much it sells for. I'll get into that in a second. The Rogue Strix, that sells at $1799. So looking at that, yes, the Taichi, if you're looking at a budget, I would get the Taichi even over the 6900 XT, because you're still saving $100 there. You know what I mean? And if you look up at the Speedster by SFX 6900 XT, which is what I've ordered, it's a AIB card. So that is nearly at the price of the Rogue Strix card. Let's move on to the real world pricing. Okay, looking at the real world pricing, starting off with the 6800, it goes up to like $1,300. Then you go at the XT version at $1,500. The normal one I've looked and got an average at about $1,800. This Asrock Taichi, after paying shipping and after paying credit card surcharge, it came to $1,835 that I bought it for. So the Asrock Taichi cost me nearly the same as the 6900 XT, and it gives the same performance with more leg room to overclock the reference card. And the Rogue Strix, I could not find for the life of me a price for it. Didn't find a sale anywhere. And the Speedster at $1,859. So $1,859 and Taichi. So if you're looking at that, both are ABI, then I would go for the Speedster. I would go for the 6900 XT in real world pricing. So it's $1,859 versus $1,799. However, you got to remember the Taichi has a lot more room to the overclock, but you can only push it so far. You know what I mean? You can't push it more than that. It'll just keep heating up and do nothing and things like that. So you got to also take that into stock out. So considering that, and also considering the RTX 3090, that's at $2,500. So the 6900 XT in real world pricing at $1,859, good. And Taichi, if I got the Rogue Strix price, I think it would have been a bit higher, quite a bit higher. Taichi in MSRP world, I would have been happy with the Taichi, but in crazy world right now, you get what you can get hand on. But if you can get your hand on an FX Speedster, get it. However, having said that, the Taichi is an absolutely beautiful, stunning card to look at. Got all what it needs. It's got the cooling, everything like that. I would get that in a heartbeat once prices settle down, or if you're looking at this video in the future, I would get that Taichi card in a heartbeat. Alright, that's the final say I had to say about this. Hope you guys liked the video. Give it a thumbs up, helps out. Alright guys, so if you want to see more videos and support the channel and you like this video, please give me a like, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. Also check out my Twitter, Instagram and Patreon accounts. That helps a lot if you follow them and contribute there. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.